I would now like to request our panelists to come up to the dais. I would be inviting Mr. G. Kiran Kumar, Senior Research Scholar, Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad. Dr. Ajailu Niumai, Head, Center for the Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy, University of Hyderabad. Dr. Dasoju Sravan, Senior TRS Leader. Dr. E. Venkatesu, Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad. Dr. G. Nagaraju, Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Hyderabad. Dr. K. Lakshman, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. And Mr. R. Krishnaya, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, Government of India. I would now request Mr. G. Kiran Kumar to moderate the session. Thank you.
Here to discuss on different social policies for marginalized sections and thinking beyond reservations. We also touch on some of the aspects of reservations. Fortunately or unfortunately, all three politicians are not here. So, Dr. Lakshman, Sri Krishnaya, and Dr. Dasoju Sravan. So all are busy with elections. So that may happen in next this year, this month. So expressing regretness of not coming to this panel. So let's go into this panel, main theme of this panel, and let me also introduce our three panelists today with us. Professor Ajailu Niumai, and she's also head for Center for Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policies. And she's also research associate at Department of Sociology, University of Johannesburg. And she has done so much of work on human trafficking, especially women trafficking. She's actually on ground. She's doing intensive work in Manipur, especially on Naga tribe, and in both Telugu states, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. And she's also actively involved in contributing policy level contribution at ministry level and also Women Commission. So we have with us our other panelist, Professor Venkatesu, E. Venkatesu, who is also from University of Hyderabad. He is professor in Department of Political Science. And he is quite activist turned politician, we can say, sorry, activist and academician, quite active since Mandal movement, both in Jawaharlal Nehru University and also in University of Hyderabad. And he also actually looking after the policy domain, public policies, and actually presented papers, published papers in journals, reputed journals on, especially on social issues and public policy issues. And we have with us our other panelist, Professor Nagaraju. He is now Dean Students Welfare, University of Hyderabad, who is again from Department of Sociology. He is also quite, since his youth stage, he is quite active in raising so many issues, especially on marginalized communities. His research themes are sociology of marginalized communities, sociology of youth, and sociology of education. So without wasting any time, we already delayed for 15-20 minutes. So let's start with Professor Ajailu. You can share your research areas initially and then throw light on human trafficking, because according to 2021 NCRB data, there is actually 15.6% increase in violence against women. So in this context, how you actually wanted to look at your research and policy suggestions?
Okay. So, am I audible? Should I sit here and just talk, or shall I go there? Okay. I think I prefer to stand and speak. Thank you, Kiran, and the organizers for inviting me, and also distinguished co-panelists from the University of Hyderabad, my colleagues here, and distinguished guests, I feel it's a privilege to speak about my story of how I encountered a traffic girl in 2008. I was in Manipur, after spending months summer holiday. On the day I was attempting to board the flight. One lady called me out and said she needs my help. She happened to know me and my family, although I don't know her. And she was with another lady and a man. And she said, please help my younger sister who's traveling for the first time by flight. I said, yes, please describe about her. Surely I will help her. When my little brother, who's from IIT Delhi, and myself checked in to the first layer of security, I found that there's none of that kind of feature. So at that moment, my brother kept insisting that something is fishy. And things are pretty bad in 2008 because of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act implemented in Northeast, particularly in states like Manipur and Nagaland. Security was very strict once we checked into the airports. But nonetheless, with a good intention, I walked up to the CISF person and said, "Bhaiya, 5 minutes ke liye thoda permission de do bahar jane ke liye." Surprisingly, he said yes. So when I went out and met this lady, she looks nervous and still was there with a friend and a man. I told her, may I know if your sister is traveling to Hyderabad so that I can catch hold of her either in Calcutta or in Hyderabad? She said, no, my sister is going to Singapore. Now at that moment, my mind blew away because she looks very poor and anemic, and so is her friend. And I said, I was thinking at that moment whether this is about trafficking, this is about sex, work, what is it? Is it labor? I mean, all those wild imaginations just occur in my mind at the spur of the moment. Now, when I broached to her whether her sister is going to study in Singapore, her reply shocked me more. It baffles me when she said, my sister and my friend's daughter, both of them are going to work as housemaids in Singapore. At that moment, I just said to her, be careful. If you need any help, contact my folks, since you said that you know them. At that moment, the man who was standing next to these two ladies began to show a hostile body language towards me and challenged me. And he even asked the question, what muscle power, what kind of political power do I have in Hyderabad? Now that incident made me think, what can I do to save the tribal girls from Northeast, who have been trafficked not only within the country, but overseas? And I remember what my mother used to tell me as a young girl, pen is mightier than the sword. With that note, I began to read rigorously on sex trafficking and trafficking for labor. And that was my journey, Kiran, of doing my research funded by the University Grants Commission. And there was no academic scholarly articles and books on trafficking of girls in Northeast in 2008 and 9. And therefore, I was compelled to look at South India, Andhra Pradesh united before the bifurcation, Telangana and Andhra, because there's a rich literature of trafficking of girls here in down south. And with that, I am able to produce a lot of literature. And I even met the Chief Minister of Manipur, Sri Biren Singh, in 2017, in the month of May. He gave me 20 minutes closed door meeting where I said to him, sir, that day, thankfully, Mary Com, as a member of Rajya Sabha, also came just along with me. It just happened by chance. And I said, sir, every traffic girl that we save may become the next Mary Com, who will bring laurel to the country, and the tiny state of Manipur will be in the global map. Sure enough, in the following year, in 2008, the policy was implemented. Anti-Trafficking Commission was constituted by the Chief Minister of Manipur. Now, this was my journey. And Andhra and Telangana has a rich legacy of Devadasi system, where a Dalit woman, Dalit girl, teenage girl, will be offered to the deity forever. and she will have to entertain for the rest of her life sexual needs and desires of the upper caste men. And you all know many of the stories that the children and grandchildren of the Devdasis are still alive. Devdasi may be gone on paper, but it is still thriving in many forms. I have done field work in the twin city of Hyderabad and Secunderabad. One of the NGOs that work aggressively is Chaitanya Mahila Mandali. They have a wonderful website, and it's run by a sex reformer called Jayama. And another NGO called Sahin, run by a Muslim feminist, Jamila Nishad, who works on Muslim teenage girls who are married to 70-year-old sheikhs and transported or pushed to the Gulf countries, where they serve as the modern slave. So if you talk about violence against women, this is the ultimate violence against women, where women are sold as slaves in our 21st century. Another striking thing that I have been thinking aloud is how the Telugu-speaking states of Andhra and Telangana have produced world's best technocrats. The Silicon Valley in California is dominated by the Telugu-speaking Vadus. But why is it that their women are sold in the flesh market? I also would like to draw your attention that flesh prostitution and sex trafficking is the third most lucrative business in the world after arms and drugs. The previous speaker talked about Ambanis, Adanis, Lohias, Tatas. Trafficking is much richer. Traffickers are much richer than all these multinational company tycoons that she mentioned about. The next, I'm going to talk about violence against women. Violence against women is like a COVID pandemic. It is like a virus. Just as we see the COVID variant keep changing, the level of violence keep changing. On New Year's Eve, you know how 20-year-old girl was dragged in a scooty up to 4 to 10 kilometers in a place called Munira, next to India's top intellectual institution, my alma mater JNU. In a place, Munirka, where Nirbhaya was also raped in a running bus. The nation was shocked. The accused were arrested. There's protests yesterday and today. A couple of months back, Bilkanas Banu, rapists, 11 rapists were released, and there was celebration. We've seen how they were garlanded. Mithai bhi de diya un log ko. This is after 70 years of independence. We have celebrated 70 years of India's independence, but violence against women continues. And the worst victims are the Dalits, the Adivasi tribal women, and the religious minorities. During the COVID time, violence against women increased. Actually, there was a group of sociologists, whom we often debate that perhaps the rape case will decrease during the first wave and second wave of COVID. Unfortunately, the rape case is still prevalent during that period. Even the COVID positive girl who is in quarantine center were not spared. A man who is not COVID positive will go and rape that woman who is COVID positive. Virus didn't stop violence against women. Gender-based violence in statistics reveal that 1 in 3 women gets abused at the global level, which means 800 million of women worldwide face gender violence by their partners. You have seen how a young man chopped a woman, a girlfriend, live-in girlfriend into 35 parts and store it in 360 refrigerator for 5 months. And then he threw her parts in black polythene bag in Meroli forest in Delhi. Then only he was arrested after 5 months. Heinous crime, cutting into body, intimate partner crimes are the highest in our country. Now, I also would like to say that my hypothesis denotes that violence is due to the traditional structure of patriarchy and also the culture of discrimination and mass media that exacerbate the existing violence against women. The question that I raise is, how can we think of gender equality when gender violence is rampant around us? How can we think of gender equality? There's so much of gender gap in India. In the context of pre-COVID times, Telangana and Manipur stands number 1 and number 2 in terms of violence, domestic violence. And unfortunately, I belong to Manipur. And I lived and married in Telangana. And the 2 states that I belong to map number 1 and 2 in India for domestic violence. In a culture of Manipur, slapping a woman and kicking her ass by the husband is not a big deal. It's culturally accepted. I remember even in Nagaland, till 5-6 years back, there's not even a single case of domestic violence reported to the government. Now, what is the way forward? I propose 6 way forward. In order to visualize a free society, a society free from violence against women, we need to stop trafficking of girls and women, including boys. There are an innumerable number of boys who are sold for sex in places like Goa, and boys in the international porous border of the Northeast, to use as drug peddlers, to use as child shoulders in the Kachin Hills of Myanmar. I have gone for my fieldwork in Myanmar, and you will be surprised to know that I didn't carry my passport. I didn't have the visa. I didn't even have the day pass the day I went in, because I went in a car which belongs to a powerful man. That's my privilege, by the way. Second, we need to give proper value to women's work. Many times when women work at home, especially the homemakers, they're looked down upon as jobless women. They are not respected because she's not earning in terms of monetary aspects. We need to give value to women's work, get women into decision-making bodies and involve them in exercising power, make education gender sensitive. Even when we look around, in my own University of Hyderabad, there is a lack of gender sensitization even among the male faculty members and also the male colleagues in the non-teaching staff community. Third, we need to set up an anti-human trafficking unit across each district and anti-human trafficking clubs in educational institutions to prevent sex trafficking and labor trafficking of innocent girls and women. And in these times of COVID, the number of cyber trafficking has increased tremendously. Fourth way forward is the physical security for the marginalized girls and women needs to be prioritized to ensure women's inclusion and gender equality. Hyderabad has the SHE team. Hyderabad Police has a SHE team in our city, but such SHE teams should also be in rural areas everywhere. Fifth way forward is there must be a special police unit for northeastern region, Spooner, in Telugu-speaking states too, as women from northeast India in the unorganized sectors often end up as victims of violence and trafficking. I have helped in reintegrating some of the northeast girls from Hyderabad and Secunderabad. One of the classic cases is a Thai Tantra spa victims here in our own Gachibowli, Jubilee Hills and Banjara Hills, So there is a serious need for Spooner, the Northeast Special Police Unit, to be set up in the twin city of Hyderabad and Secunderabad. Lastly, representative of all development initiatives must include women to ensure their concerns that are to be voiced. Women's voiceless issues should be heard by the masses. The lady, the speaker in front of just before us have spoken about how she managed to capture a girl's story who has to go to school passing through a Thakur village. I think these are voices, invisible voices that needs to be voiced. And development is also a clear option about correcting gender inequalities, increasing employment opportunities for women, and addressing the challenge of patriarchy and gender equality under the purview of inclusive policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ajailu. So, coming back, it's a very interesting story, and the comparison you are doing is very extremely beneficial for policy perspectives. So, coming to Professor Venkatesu, so you are being active in Mandal politics and Mandal, post-Mandal, academic, both in academic field and also at the grassroots level. So Mandal is all about, we all debate only on reservations, but Mandal is all about beyond Mandal. Mandal report includes so many suggestions for the empowerment of socially and educationally backward sections. So can you throw some light on the hesitation, and then we will come back to you on other issues.
Thank you, Kiran, for moderating this session, and my colleagues on the University of Hyderabad and delegates from different parts of the country. I think probably this topic, reservation policy in India, probably for the first time that is being discussed on this campus. Because there has been a mindset among the people, the elite section of this country, the upper caste people of this country. The mindset is that once you start speaking about the reservations, their tendency, attitude is that this is reservation is something related to this caste, taste, and then meritless people. The person, because of the attitude that has been existing today in the country, is that if you are coming into a public institution under the reservation quota, either in the admissions or in the faculty member, that these type of people are bringing only two things. One is the caste, second is the meritlessness. That is how this attitude. Even Chandrababu Naidu got benefited a lot from the backward classes, and Chandrababu Naidu was the instrumental lot introducing the reservation policy in this institute itself, ISB itself. So that is in this kind of mindset. So let me give us some brief historical account of this reservation policy and come into what is the kind of attitude that has been existing, prevailing today in the country among the, as far as the backward classes in general, other backward classes in general, and reservation policy in particular. See, this whole idea of the affirmative action policy, reservation policy that has been started in the country in 1870s somewhere, when the Britishers have realized that the Muslim community is being neglected. They are set aside from the education that was introduced through the Macaulay recommendation. Under the Macaulay's recommended education system, the British colonial people have verified the statistical data that it is only the upper caste Hindus have been getting maximum benefit of the Macaulay education system. So therefore, the Muslims must also be accommodated in the Macaulay education system. Therefore, they have started initiating certain incentives in order to provide the education facilities for the Muslim communities. Later, it has been extended to the hill area people, the tribal community, and then the Dalit lower caste people, and then subsequently to the backward classes. Backward classes, then it was known as rural artisan service communities. So that was the beginning point for the reservation policy. That means that it has got the genesis during the colonial period. The second political regime that has initiated the reservation policy was the indigenous princely states. That is the Kolhapur state has introduced, the Mysore Maharaja has introduced, the Travancore Maharaja has introduced the reservation policy, and then third political regime that has taken an initiation in order to reservation policy is the post-independent democratic political system. And in fact, when you look at the constitutional debates, because on each and every item, whether say it is a reservation policy, or the institution of bureaucracy, institution, or the directive principles of the state policy, fundamental rights of the Indian Constitution. There has been a series of deliberation at the time of the Constituent Assembly debates. So as far as scheduled caste reservations are concerned, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has taken that is one of the important challenging project. So he was able to convince the Constituent Assembly. Subsequently, some of the tribal leaders were able to convince the Constituent Assembly in order to provide their quota in proportion to their population in the public sector with reference to the education, employment and political sphere. However, the backward classes, other backward classes first, number one, there was no proper leadership in the Constituent Assembly for the other backward classes. There was a weak voice from the backward classes. So therefore, after commencement of the Indian Constitution on 26th January 1950s, the first case that was challenged in the Supreme Court was Chempakan Dorai Rajan versus the state of Madras. Because in Dadar and Madras state, there was a communal GO. According to that GO, there was a reservation policy. That was coterminous, contrasting the right to equality, in the fundamental rights of the Indian Constitution. That was challenged in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court verdicted against the Dadan exist in the communal GO. So then there was an agitation across the country in protest against the dropping of the communal GO. So therefore, Nehru government has initiated the first constitutional amendment to the Indian Constitution was introducing of the constituting a commission in order to study the socio-economic conditions of the other backward classes in 1950s itself, under the chairmanship of Kaka Kalelkar Commission, that is known as the Kaka Kalelkar Commission. Unfortunately, the chairman heart itself was burnt when, after completing of that report, drafting of the report, chairman wrote in his preface that for taking the caste, my heart is burning. This is not, I was not convinced with this report. And subsequently, there was no debate in the parliament during the time of the stalled democratic ruler of the country, Jawaharlal Nehru and Govinda Vallabh. These are the three people they have set aside the Kaka Kalelkar Commission report. So therefore, it has gathered the dust. I don't know whether the journalist who has spoke in the last session, whether she is available or not, she must know some of the historical facts. And then there was no question of the reservations until 1970s when the Janata government has came into existence. That was a non-Congress government, essentially represented by the non-Brahmins. Then in 1978, the Janata government has constituted for the Mandal Commission, Bindeswar Prasad Mandal Commission, and it has submitted its report in 1982, and it has gathered dust again for the 1 decade, because during the time of Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi, it had never even touched, because they have picked up some of the recommendations of the Mandal Commission, they have started implemented, and they never refer to either OBCs or Mandal Commission. The Navodaya schools was the recommendation of the Mandal Commission. But is it neither Rajiv Gandhi nor Congress government has never referred to that Mandal Commission has recommended. It is meant for the rural areas, socially and educationally backward communities of this country. And it has set aside no reservation for the other backward classes. And again, a non-Congress, when a non-Brahmin has become a Prime Minister of this country, Vishwanath Pratap Singh, he was the first chief Prime Minister of this country who has got guts and courage in order to take the decision to implement the 27%. That is only one of the recommendations. That is only one of the recommendations of Mandal Commission. In fact, that only 27%, because they was strictly followed. The Supreme Court judgment is the reservation should not exceed the more than 50%. That was the constitutional technical problem was existed, therefore they only 27%. 27% decision was taken to implementation. Again, there was across the country, there was a hue and cry. You know, in this country, whenever there has been a poverty, there is a backwardness, nobody will protest. But whenever you give a reservations to the lower caste, whether there was an extension of the 10 years of reservation to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, or reservation for the other backward classes, it is bound to have a anti-reservation movement. It's just like a sun is rising on the east and setting on the west. So whenever there has been a reservation policy for the lower caste, then automatically it leads to the anti-reservation movement in the country. Your media, the media has played, because I was the evidence at Jawaharlal Nehru University. I was a student of JNU 91-93. That was the peak stage of the anti-Mandal agitation on this so-called JNU left democratic campus. That has, these are one of the worstest campus during the Mandal Commission. As a organizer in defense of the Mandal Commission, when we invited Sharad Yadav to JNU campus, cutting across your ideology, whether you are a leftist, centrist or rightist, all these people, anti-reservationists, these upper caste people have come together, have thrown the chappals and shoes on Sharad Yadav. By this indicator, can you call it JNU as the most left democratic campus? So that was the kind of brutality that has came up in response to Mandal Commission decision to implementation by Vishwanath Pratap Singh. Your media has opposed. Media has played the most undemocratic, unconstitutional role during the Mandal Commission. I can provide you the substantial evidences. The CIA, the FICCI, the business community, the trade community, the media, the bureaucracy, the political parties, these are all have taken a anti-reservation for the OBC and started the agitation. The only hope that was there for the other backward classes pro-reservation was that only the limited progressive forces, the civil society and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has convinced, despite there has been a hue and cry, anti-Mandal agitation in the country, across the country, nook and corner, because I fully agree, I fully endorse that Vishwanath Pratap Singh's statement that is the media instigated agitation. The media, the most undemocratic, unconstitutional media instigated anti-Mandal agitation. So that was saved by the Supreme Court only in its judgment, Indira Sahani versus Government of India judgment. So that was the only Supreme Court was convinced with the theory of the natural justice, the theory of the social justice, the right to equality, and the socially and educational backwardness of this country. And this is the one of the ameliorated and incrementalistic policy. This is not going to change the basic structural inequalities which have been existing in this country. And it is also Supreme Court also has evolved the means test called the creamy layer that has imposed. And till date for the last 3 decades, I challenged in the API court in 1998 in the Supreme Dadena Andhra Pradesh High Court for not implementing the Supreme Court judgment of the 27% reservations for the other backward classes. Daden UGC University Grants Commission Chairman Hari Gautam was summoned on this case. And then only the government of India has taken a decision to implement. Unfortunately, exactly by 2023, it has been going to complete by August 9th, because it has already completed the 3 decades, and because of 1989, on 9th August, Vishwanath Pratap Singh government has taken a decision to implement, and it has completed 3 decades of the starting of the implementation of the OBC reservations, but till date, it has not completed even the 14% of the reservations. That shows the commitment. That shows the commitment of the policy, because Kiran has taken under right information. We will discuss
more on
right information. I just complete within 30 seconds. So yes, take on the Right to Information Act. The minister himself has announced in the parliament that even the 14% of the reservations not implemented. But when you look at the EWS quota, when the government of India has taken a decision to implement the EWS quota, there was no opposition against the reservation policy. And with all the 100% measures have been taken in order to implement the OBC quota. So that shows the caste-mindedness of this country, and nowadays everyone is trying to find out their solution to their problem, either in fighting the reservations or opposing the reservations. That is the kind of pathetic situation that has been emerging, and of course the reservation policy itself is being killed in the process of the corporatization and multinational companies entry of the into the Indian economy. They are not going to implement the reservation policy. Thank you for giving this support.
Thank you, Professor Venkatesh. So going to Professor Nagaraju. So you can sit there and you can discuss, or you want to use, yeah. So you can talk more on education policies and your research work, especially for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes.
Thank you, Mr. Kiran. At the outset, I'm extremely thankful to you for floating this idea and inviting me. I'm also thankful to my panelists and also the ladies and gentlemen. So it gives me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts on the very idea of policy making with reference to the education and healthcare from the perspective of the subaltern communities of our nation. So we are talking about the education and healthcare, as scholars like Amartya Sen, who argues that the Human Development Index is going to be measured through the lens of access to primary education and access to primary healthcare. But the point is, how far our nation is successful in educating the people? So the idea is that educating the people is a precondition for bringing the social democracy. But unfortunately, when you look at the 75 years of independence, though we have successfully achieved the universalization of primary education, but most of the girl children, as well as most of the boys from the marginal sections of the society in general, and the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and OBC in particular, are not in a position to complete even their secondary education. So what is the reason for their failure even to complete their 10th standard is a big challenge. So the idea is that though the Constitution, the constitutional framers made an attempt to include education as a fundamental right way back to 1947 at the time of independence, but the regressive forces who were part of the constitutional debates were not prepared to accept education as one of the constitutional rights. The reason was that at the time, the Indian Congress Party was completely dominated by the feudal lords, though the progressive forces under the leadership of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and others, they were trying to articulate the idea that education should be declared as a fundamental right. But because of the regressive ideology of the feudal forces, who were not willing to accept education as a fundamental right, because they were afraid that if all the children goes to school, who are going to work in their fields. So this is the kind of the mindset that let's say, Congress leadership of 1947 had shared about the idea of education. So only, of course, the same Congress Party government, way back to 2009, under the UPA banner, has enacted the Right to Education Act. So the point is that education is always referred as a means of individual mobility, family mobility, and also social transformation. But the point is that, friends, from 1947 to 2022, when you look at the journey of education policy and practice, though there are a number of measures were introduced by the Government of India as well as the respective state governments, but we can always see the policy lapses. So let me highlight what are the policy lapses with reference to the educational programs. So the idea is that though the very idea of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, educating all, was the goal of the Constitution, which was reflected in the directive principles of state policy at the time of the enactment of Constitution. But what are the measures the government has introduced as a part of universalization of education? If you go into the debates, though the primary school, most of the schools were known as the single teacher schools, are very much part of the different villages from Andhra Pradesh to Arunachal Pradesh. But when you look at the middle school and high schools, these high schools and middle schools are primarily placed in the nearby talukas or nearby bundle headquarters. So one of the primary reasons for the highest level of dropout rates in the rural India is because of lack of the middle level schools and high schools. So the girl children from the lower caste were deprived of education. Even the girl children from the upper caste background, despite of completing even the middle school, because of the cultural reasons, their parents never made a systematic attempt to educate their girls even up to the 10th standard. So, but the point is that the government, as a part of the correction measures, they introduce a new, let's say, policy intervention in the name of Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas, just to prevent the dropout of the girl children who belong to the marginal sections of the society, especially the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and OBC and religious minorities. But what are the structural limitations with this kind of policies? So friends, the government always follows the patriarchal policies with reference to the education system. On the one hand, we have Navodaya schools, which caters the educational needs of the rural elite as well as the better off sections of the Indian society. On the other hand, the Kasturba Gandhi schools, though which are primarily meant for the dropout girl children, but when you look at, when you visit the schools, which primarily reflects the poverty of the schooling itself. So what I try to submit is that there is a patriarchal mindset in the making of the policy itself. So when you look at the conditions of the scheduled tribes and scheduled caste schools, though most of the governments in different parts of the India have introduced the social welfare hostels, which are sometimes attached to the government Jilla Parishad schools. But if you look at the facilities in the hostels, which are really worse. So the point I am trying to highlight is that what is the role of the government towards educating the marginal sections of the society? Because most of the people from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe background, they are known as landless agricultural laborers, where 95% of the children, 95% of the people from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, they are deprived of right to land. In the sense, by preventing right to land, they have already prevented from right to economic resources. A right to livelihood is always under threat. When the right to livelihood is a source of, let's say, one of the important sources of survival. So what kind of priorities the people from these sections of the society are going to attach to the education and healthcare? When you look at the lifespan of the women from the upper strata of the background and the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe background, there is almost 15 years of, let's say, lifespan difference between the women from upper strata and women from these marginal communities. The reason is that, this is the Oxfam report, the reason is that most of these women from the marginal sections of the society, they are deprived of even proper food because of cultural reasons, and they were also deprived of proper food because of lack of proper economic support. So the point I am trying to say is that, friends, when you're trying to look at the very idea of livelihood, the people who belong to 22% of the population, only the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, the OBCs, who constitutes almost 45 to 50% of the population of India, when you combine the two, except some 10% of the upper layer of OBC, right? That is the 40% of OBCs who belong to the below poverty line, and the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, almost 90% of them, 95% of them belong to the BPL category. That means almost 80% of the Indian population, they primarily hails from the marginal sections of the society. But the idea is that how far the government has, what kind of measures the government of India has prepared, and what kind of measures that respective state governments have introduced. Friends, wherever we see, look at some of the policy interventions, such as the midday meal scheme introduced by the government of Tamil Nadu way back to 1960s, and also the social welfare residential schools introduced by the government of Andhra Pradesh way back to 1984. These are some of the important policy interventions which definitely played a vital role in uplifting or transforming the lives of this section to a certain extent. But the point is that, friends, in order to enhance the capacity building, if I quote Amartya Sen, the two important policy measures are right to quality education and right to quality health care. I think these are the two important sources which are going to enable the people from these marginal sections to access the better employment opportunities, and by accessing the better employment opportunities, they are also going to lead a dignified life. So thank you, Kiran, for giving me this opportunity. I think in second round, I wish to articulate some more points. Thank you.
We'll have a question and answer session. So before that, just quick questions to each one. As we celebrated Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and next 25 years are very crucial for the country, as we celebrate our 100th Independence Day. So what are your policies you already made? So how the governments, both the central government and the state government, should actually work on these issues, especially on women issues?
Yeah, can I have? Thank you for the question. I feel that the law should be implemented in the context of violence against women, and the law enforcement agency should make sure that the conviction rate against the perpetrators of crime should increase. In 2021 and 22, the conviction rate of the traffickers, the criminals, is only 16%, 1/6, which is very, very low compared to developed countries. So this, the government should make sure that the laws are implemented properly. There are innumerable number of laws in favor of women, starting from the Domestic Violence Act of 2005 to Dowry Harassment Act, Prohibition Act of 1961, Immoral Traffic and Prevention Act of 1956. I mean, goes on and on and on. But actually, the ground reality speaks a different story. I also would like to quickly cite a story that I and two of the people have handled the case of a rape victim, 18-year-old from Nagaland in Jubilee Hills. When I went there in the evening, this is 2014, and when I went there to the Jubilee Hills police station, the police said she's no longer here. The girl has been shifted. I said, why? The criminals are in the lockup in the same jail, and they replied to me saying that she's 18, and below 18 they should not be in the police station. Therefore, we have sent her to the government shelter home in Eragada. When I finally contacted the warden, they said that visiting hour is over. I said, no, I have to be given the permission by hook or by crook. And finally, when I called one of the former IGP, they somehow gave me the permission. When I landed up there with a lot of traffic, it was around 10:30, and when I met the girl, she had blood all over her, a physical bruise all over her, and we've never met, but when she saw me, she came and cried and hugged me. Now, it took 4 days. Can you imagine? 4 long days. She was not even given the first aid. And I was compelled to give my identity card of University of Hyderabad as a sabut, evidence that I am responsible for her life and welfare, to send her back to Nagaland. Now this shows that there is a gap in the implementation of law. The law is supposed to be in favor of girl. She is a victim of attempted rape, but she's been tortured and traumatized, again by the law. So the law has to be implemented and the conviction rate has to increase.
That's very, very much well taken. Professor Venkatesu, OBCs are actually considered as vote bank. But what is the government must do for the empowerment of OBCs for next 25 years?
Yeah. First thing is that the largest chunk of the population of this country have been finding their solution in for their problems only through the reservations. That is how this the number of social categories which have been demanding for the reservations have been increasing. And as of now, it is about 60% of the population of this country is coming under the category of the reservations. That is the one interesting thing. On the other side, the cake size of the public sector has been coming down. This is enigmatic, some sort of a puzzle. How we are going to solve this puzzle is a very challenging task before the policy makers of this country. So whether you are going to nationalize all the private assets, public property, private property is the one, and second is that are you going to implement the reservations in the private sector, corporate sector. The people have been generating the material wealth in this country for centuries together or happens to the production communities, the service rendering communities, the lower caste people, the rural artisan, the service rendering people, the agriculture labor, the farming community of this country. So therefore, these are the two options which have been left before in the next coming 25 years for among these lower caste people in general and other backward classes, either for nationalization of all the private property or else reservations in the public sector.
That's very
Private
provocating.
sector,
Maybe we have to look at inclusiveness in corporate world. So coming to Professor Nagaraju, so what should government do for improving the education status of especially SCs and Adivasis, scheduled types and scheduled castes?
Thank you, Kiran. Now one can see the educational divide in the name of the private schools for quality education and the government school for poor people. This is how the education sector is divided on the basis of class. So my only suggestion for the coming 25 years is that the government of India as well as the respective state government should develop the quality education, so that is going to improve the capacities of the children. So as most of the private schools are known for, let's say, implementing English as a medium of instruction, the government schools should also focus on imparting English communication skills from class 1 onwards. At the same time, the government very systematically, if you look at post-LPG era, most of the middle class from upper strata of the Indian society, they have migrated from Indian cities to the American cities. So there is a transnational middle class, global middle class as an outcome of the liberalization, privatization and globalization. The ASB is one of the important landmark in the making of the transnational middle class, and our high-tech city is one of the landmark. So my only submission is that in the coming 25 years, there should be number of dickies on par with Fiki. So the Dalits should emerge as the Dalit millionaire. The Adivasi should emerge as Adivasi millionaires. The OBC should also become the big millionaires of the country. So the reason is that despite of, let's say, 75 years of independence or almost 150 years of colonial modernity, but unfortunately even today, we hardly find even a single millionaire from the marginal sections of the Indian society. So therefore, the only way is that improving the quality of education and empowering these marginal communities, they should aim at the California, not Calcutta or Hyderabad.
Yeah, that's great. So we'll take just one question, one set of questions maybe. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
My question is to Professor Venkatesu. Is it actually because it just in very short span of time get implemented against to what it was like OBC reservation implementation? That's the question one. And the fourth question is, should there be any thresholds like, not female but the OBC implementation? So if your answer is no, like how do we actually measure the upliftment of a OBC family in terms of the category?
No, first of all, I am not against the EWS quota. The way
Yeah, I'm saying you're critical of it.
Yeah, I am critical as well as the process, the way the state has been responded, the society has been responding. and the quickness of the in implementation of EWS quota, and even the government, and even making the constitutional amendment act, that is all fine, okay.
Yeah.
I am not critical of the people who have been getting the benefits from the under EWS quota. State why the same attitude has not shown towards the other castes.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
number two, this reservation for the lower caste is not an economic poverty reduction program. It is a question of the social justice. It is a question of the self-respect and dignity, because these people were deprived 3 basic rights: right to education, right to rule, and right to possess the property for the last more than 3,000 years. It is the only democratic political system. It is because of the series of the political movements led by Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, Ambedkar and others. Now they are getting their dignity and self-respect. So it is not a poverty reduction program. Poverty reduction programs, there are plenty of them are available.
Oh.
So
for second question, criminal is already there for OBCs.
It's there, I'm asking, should it be there? I'm asking, like there are...
No, that is a big...
no, whether, no, but whether it is supposed to be there, it has already been there. Even EWS quota also, there has been a ceiling has been there.
Yeah.
And then for the OBCs, they are facing a lot of problems in getting even caste certificate.
Yeah.
I have seen examined across the country.
Yeah.
Kerala is the only one state that has been quite effectively facilitating, and Kerala has fought least for the OBC reservations, and Kerala is the maximum beneficiary of the reservations today.
So that's actually a provocating session, and I just conclude this session by saying, by just quoting whatever quote that was quoted by in the budget. The budget lays a parallel track of a blueprint for the Amrit Kal, which is futuristic and inclusive, directly benefiting youth, women, farmers, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and socially and educationally backward classes. I hope next 25 years will be, the government will be concentrating on removing all kinds of discrimination against women, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and OBCs, and lays different policies for the empowerment of these sections. And I hope they are also part of the inclusiveness, the greater inclusive and sustainable society. So with this note, I thank everyone for joining, especially our panelists, and I also thank whoever joined today. Thank you very much.